The Great Debaters Contest is powered by Blaze, by Safaricom, the Youth Network.
Welcome to the Machakos edition of the Great Debaters Contest. Of course, we continue with our theme of promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, #GDC for SDGs. I am your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. Our motion today is governments have a duty to bail out failing financial institutions. We have Muvuti High School going against Ngalalia. And Mariam, do you think they can tackle this highly economic motion?
I think we'll let them decide and answer that question for us. Proposal number 1, you have 3 minutes.
John Mayer quoted that a market can stay irrational longer than an institution to be solvent. My name is Faith Njeri from Ngalaria High School, hereby to strongly propose the motion that says governments have a duty to bail out foreign financial institutions. First and foremost, we get to get the key terms definition of financial institutions. Financial institutions are companies dealing with monetary transactions, e.g. deposits, loans, and also currency exchange. Bailing out is extending financial ability to an individual or a country facing bankruptcy threat. I strongly believe that government should bail out all financial foreign institutions. Why? Because some of the foreign financial institutions are beyond their control. For example, due to the global recessions in the country, whereby we have inflation and also low minimum wage employment. For example, an instance in Spain, whereby in 1982 to 1983, as Spain 52 banks experienced crisis, where there was an oil shock in 1974 to 1975. We find out that Spain took long 10 years to cover up for the mess that the foreign financial Spain took 10 years to cover out for the mess that the global recessions had done. Second, moreover, the foreign financial institutions are not due to because their own mismanagement. Government contributes like 90% of the foreign institutions. Subsequently, government, due to laxity and lack of supervision to regulation of these financial institutions, for instance, in Chase Bank, a current foreign financial institutions in Kenya, whereby we found that the bank fell out because the CEO and the shareholders never took hold of what happened in Chase Bank. And then we find that also that the global recessions, when you lend money to the financial institutions, you will get a payback in terms of loan and interest to the government. If a government will lend a financial institutions, for example, bank loans, it will get back in terms of interest. And this, I support my statements where I said that when in 1915 September 2008, it happened that the Lehman brothers had a fallout in their bank. And when the US government got in to step in and keep the wheels turning for the financial institutions, it happened that when the bank was still continuing, it went up and paid back the government with an equal interest amount. Thank you. With all that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you. Opposition, you have 3 minutes for your opening statements.
I'm Brian Zio. I'm Gabriel Kioko from Muvuti High School. As my first leader said, the financial institution is any institution that deals with currency or money. We all deposit our money in the bank and withdraw the money, right? We all know that banks make the huge profit every year. So, should the government really bail the financial institutions? Not really. The first point is that the bailing out will encourage mismanagement among the financial institutions because they are sure the government will later interfere and help them out later on. There will lead to scandals in the government since the money used in the bailing out should have been used to build better social amenities that will help the common citizen, wananchi. Financial institution, the second point, is that are normally large and complex. Therefore, their problems can be resolved by internal restructuring instead of the government to bail out the government. Complex parts like the international parts can be transferred to separate subduals, hence decreasing the financial strain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're ready to hear rebuttals, beginning with the proposers. You have 3 minutes.
He said that the money that is used to bail out banks could be used in other functions. In Ireland, an Irish bank failed, and the Irish bank was providing the 16% of the gross domestic product of Irish. That means if the government couldn't have bailed out the country itself would be in great problems in the decline of its economy. And second, he said that the banks failed due to mismanagement. Some of the banks' problems are beyond their control, such that some governments put pressure on banks that's giving out more loans and mortgages than they can, miserably, that leading to bank bailout. And that is what we have experienced in Kenya, where the Chase Bank gave an unsecured loan to the manager of 7.9 billion, where some of that money was money meant for the public, and that which others were retirement benefits from other personalities. If the government failed to bail out the bank, the retirees' benefits, the insurances that have been funded through the bank would all be losses. And once Governor Ledge said, a country without a banks is a crippled economy. That means if all banks fail, where do people get loans for? Where mortgages come from? Yeah. So if a government is able to bail out banks, that would be a great opportunity to the economy of the country. That's leading to high earnings in the economy. Global economic at chance if the banks are not bailed out. We take for chance that a bank can be invested if the bank profits are high. That means if a bank is getting low profits and the government would like to help the bank and bail it out, that means more investors to the bank, more investors to a country and to the bank also, because the government will be controlling, after bailing out, the government will be controlling the choices and the risks that banks are taking. That's leading to a good conducive environment for the banks. And because banks have the most credentiality of giving simple loans and to the citizens who may want it. Sustenance was building out such institutions is like investing in them. The money that is used to bail out banks is not like give them to them for free. They repay the loans. Like the Irish government was bailed using 462 billion. And now they have repaid back 467 billion. And with that, I rest my case.
Opposition, let's hear your rebuttal. You also have 3 minutes.
I'm Grace Muteu, and I would like to pose this motion that states that the government should bail out failing financial institutions. On to my first point, the bailout will financially tax innocent citizens who are not affiliated to that particular bank or financial institution. Let's say, for instance, the government will rely on both internal borrowing so as to pay for the bailout, and this will be paid. The bailout will have to be paid in the near future by increase of tax. As for now, we Kenyans are on the process of inflation. We all know we're going through inflation. So these bailouts, the money the banks makes, it's way more huge, so it should use the money instead of asking for the government to bail it out. And to my second point, this will discourage investors from investing in our country, seeing that there is government interference. The private investors find out that the government is involved in this financial institution, they'll be discouraged because it doesn't pose a fair competition. In case of losses, the public finance institution will be bailed out. This point clearly means that when the foreign investors come from other countries to invest in our countries and see that the government is involved with the business activities, of which the government is involved, will like feel the government is trying to minimize their potential, so the foreign investors will back out from investing in our country. Thank you.
The proposition have been asked, is it not unfair to use public taxes and public funds to bail out private financial institutions that may not be doing well? And the opposition have been asked, how do bailouts negatively affect the economy? Because they did state that they do. So we'll have them respond. Third proposer, you have 3 minutes.
Greetings. I'm Lanet Wamboi from Ngalalia Secondary School. I strongly believe that the government should bail out failing financial institutions because our economy, we are all dependent on these financial institutions. If the government does not bail out the failing financial institutions, what will happen to us? We need loans to buy cars, we need loans for our school fees, we need loans for other developments. If all the financial institutions close down, what will happen to us? If all the financial institutions do not exist, what about you and me? If you need a house, if you need something else, where will you get it? Personally, I believe that investment is key, and if you invest, you'll be able to get whatever you want in life. And I would like to answer the question from the audience. You asked that if the government is using money from the taxpayers to bail out Chase Bank. I would like to say, if the government didn't bail out Chase Bank, we would be in a difficult situation. What about the people who had invested their money in the bank? What would happen to them? Their money would have gone to waste, and they would not be compensated anytime soon. We hear stories of people whose money was closed down with banks, and they have never been compensated. So when the government bailed out Chase Bank, this was because it was protecting the taxpayers and it was protecting the citizens. For example, it's not about the taxpayers. You are just considering a point if the government uses tax. The government does not use tax to bail out banks. It uses money from the Central Bank of Kenya to bail out these banks. And if you're saying about tax, what about the people who would have lost their jobs from Chase Bank as a result of its closure? That would have meant reduced tax for the government. That would have meant an economy declining because we need that bank. We need everybody to pay taxes in order for the economy to grow. For the betterment of our lives, we also need the government to bail out failing financial institutions. We agree it was the bank's fault. Maybe it got there to some circumstances which cannot be explained by human understanding. For example, my opposition team is dwelling so much on corruption and mismanagement of funds. It doesn't have always to be mismanagement of funds and corruption. It's because of some financial constrictions that bring about the failing of our banks. And if our government does not bail out these banks, we will not have a place to turn to. We have had countries like Spain where the country bailed out its banks and the banks survived. We have Irish, the countries bailed out their banks and they survived. So I strongly believe that governments should bail out failing financial institutions. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
Failing financial institutions. Why bail them out? Why? Why should the government do that? Why? As a matter of fact, if these financial institutions are not failing due to devoid management and corruption, what else? And again, if these financial institutions, they have the idea that the government is going to bail them out, they're going to make risks and decisions in the institutions, basing on the fact that even if we are going to have a bad financial year or a bad investment, the government is going to bail us out. If the government takes part in bailing out these financial institutions, it's going to centralize the greater economic power to the government. And again, we have these officers in these financial institutions because even after bailing out the government, is going to become a major shareholder or a power owner. There are these inept government officials that are going to act to their best of interest, and we know how it always goes down.
Thank you. Final submissions now. Galalia, you have 1 minute.
As my fellow contestants from the opposition was saying, that the banks is not the only failure for banks is corruption, also mismanagement. But this mismanagement can come as in because the government own a part of the share of the bank. So the risks that are taken are therefore provided by the government. So if it is fair because the public funds that are built out, they are because the financial institutions are the economy in the most countries. If they are not built out, the financial institutions will decline in the country, and the banks are the economy. So if the banks are declining, that means the country of the economic of a country is at stake, and the government putting an economy at stake is the most and worst thing that can happen to a country. So if a government can let a bank just dissolve, so that can just dissolve because of mismanagement, and the bank is the spine of the country, what will be done to the country? Thank you.
Opposition, you have 1 minute for your final submission.
Why resuscitate these financial institutions which undergo entropy due to devoid management and corruption? People asking where the money, these funds to bail out these financial institutions come from. At the end of the day, it is either by internal borrowing or external from the IMF, that is the International Monetary Fund. And at the end of the day, being a public debt and a national debt, it has to be paid. How will it be paid? How?
Faith Kibe, you've done a good job. Good introduction, good definition of terms, and the examples you gave were also relevant from Spain, etc. But it's kind of, you need to check on your language. There's a point you were almost struggling with the language, but generally you did a good job. Then we come to Ephantas. Ephantas, you have done proper rebuttals, good illustrations, but you've majorly talked about Kenya. The question is on government, not one government. But then you ended up spending a lot of time because you are really struggling with the language. Your explanations are windy. So they end up taking a lot of your time, and that's why the bell is ringing and you are far from finishing. But when we come to Lanet Wambui, I love your work. You are composed, you have answered the questions, but then the way you answered the question, I'm not convinced. Money from the Central Bank of Kenya is from our taxes. I really did not get convinced with your answer, although you've answered.
For the opposers, I think you dwelled so much on why the failing happened, and like on that, dwelling a bit on the situation that we are already in. We have a bank here that has failed, so what do we do next? Yeah, we can question. There are all manner of bad things that happen, corruption, other things which somebody said they are beyond our control, and all that. So I think the focus was not where it's supposed to be. Yeah, so I think those are my comments for now.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the moment we've all been waiting for, Muvuti High School, the judges awarded you with 50%. Please give them a round of applause. Ngalalia, the judges saw it fit to award you 62%. You're our winners for the debate.
Thank you to the two teams on stage, and of course, congratulations to Ngalalia. Thank you to our in-studio audience and those of you at home for watching. Remember to give us your feedback on Twitter, #GDC for SDGs. I have been your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Nyumbok. Catch you next time.
Great Debaters Contest is powered by Blaze by Safaricom, the Youth Network.